Hello, and welcome to Mind Your Head, a space for people to share their stories, talk openly and honestly about their own mental health challenges, and to give some listeners some comfort in knowing you're not alone. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we record this podcast, the Gubbi Gubbi people. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Indigenous peoples. We honour their enduring connection to the land, waters and culture, and recognise their invaluable contributions they make to our communities. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. So Dayne, welcome to Mind Your Head, mate. It's a pleasure to sit down with you and chat with you today. There's so many topics I want to chat with you about, and I'm a big fan of yours and the work that you do with Men of Gold and what you advocate for. And I feel like there's a lot of similar things that we've experienced in our lives. And but first of all, can you talk me through your childhood and your upbringing and the role that sport played in your life?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Mate, I grew up in country New South Wales, grew up in Goulburn, and humble upbringing, and all I ever wanted to do was play footy. From a young kid, mate, I think my old man tells a story that I used to just follow whoever was winning, and the Broncos were going through a bit of a purple patch at one time, and then I just stuck with them, and I suppose from a young age, I always watching them and just seeing success. And my nan always used to tell the story as well about I watched them win a grand final and said that I want to win a grand final and do a lap of honour with my two boys. And I was 5 or 6 at the time, and just from then I then played footy. Back then in Goulburn, you just played for your school team, and I think age 8 or 9 we went and joined the Canberra competition. It's like 45 minutes down the road, and Goulburn Stockman was formed, and my old man actually formed that, which is pretty cool. And so Todd Carney, he grew up in Goulburn. His old man was our coach, and
Old man was your coach?
Yeah, Todd's old man
right.
was our coach, and mate, a very hard man, but learnt so much off him. And Todd credits a lot of his career and where he got to because of his old man. But we all did the same thing. We played footy, we played cricket, basketball, like touch. And back then, mate, if my kids wanted to do what I did when I was a kid, I would be broke. I would have no money. So it was quite fortunate, mate, that I got to do what I did as a young kid. And we built a bond with all these lads from a young age that we used to do everything together, and it was pretty cool. And so, just the passion started there, mate. And like I said, I loved cricket. Like rugby league was always there, but I used to love cricket, and I used to imitate Shane Warne and look nothing like him. Had the Nike earring, used to bowl leg spin, and there was a mate at work at school that I used to get out all the time. We'd have a bit of a running joke about it, but cricket was when I got to 14, 15, where rugby league looked like I was going to potentially take it a bit further. I had to stop doing all those other things because you had to just go all in. And even I had a motorbike, dirt bike in Goulburn that I used to take out, unbeknownst to Dad, whenever, just down to a paddock or whatever. And I loved that as well. And then I just literally had to stop that, sold the bike, and just when I need to commit to this. And Do
you have any favourite memories from that time in your life?
Yeah, I do, mate. Footy was always a big part of that. I had a lot of good mates and a lot of good memories of being down the creek and riding a jet ski down in the creek. No ocean down there, mate. But
no crocodiles either, which is good.
But yeah, mate, I had a great upbringing. My family was always around. We were pretty close. My nan and pop, and stuff. But yeah, it was cold. It's a cold place, but we used to get down to Ulladulla. We used to spend a lot of time in caravan park down at Ulladulla. That was a beautiful spot and that. But rugby league was always there as a child, and but yeah, I wouldn't change it, mate. It's like anything in life, it all happens for a reason, and I'm real grateful that I had that grounding from the beginning. So,
what about challenges? What were some of the sort of biggest challenges you faced as a kid growing up?
When I was playing footy, mate, I was never talented by any means. Like, I had a desire to do something, but early on I knew that if I wanted it, I'd have to work my ass off. I wasn't gifted, with this talent. It was just like a desire as I grew, and my body kind of grew into how, like, if you see my old man, you kind of had an idea what I might turn out like. So, but as a kid, I wasn't big at all. And it got to a stage, I was probably 12, 13, and my parents went through a divorce, and that was one of the most challenging times of my life. And I wanted to quit footy and just be with mum. Mum was moving to New Zealand, and yeah, and she's like, no, you need to stick at this. And I didn't see mum for 12 months, and that's a long story as well, but it really was a pivotal point in my life, which affected me mentally. Then and there, you're a kid, you just get on with it. And unfortunately, mate, I grew up in a family, in a generation that you just got on with it. And then I didn't understand it until fast forward 15 years that it would affect me like it did. Because 12 months later, I moved out of home and chased my dream to play NRL. So I had to grow up quick. I had to learn, and which parts of me, it was a good thing. I matured early. I look after myself, cook, clean, do all that. But there's a lot of my childhood I missed because I had to be someone that I probably shouldn't have been at that age.
Probably too early, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we both had that similar background of playing footy, and I've sort of talked about it before, is that, rugby for me was sort of my place to escape. It was sort of my sanctuary where I could, release all my thoughts and emotions, and it was sort of my distraction. Was footy the same for you? Was it a place where you could just be yourself and not think about other things in life?
It wasn't then when I was a kid. It was later in life. It was when I was a kid. Like, I was obviously always loved playing. I loved just like lived and breathed it. But and we'll get to the back end of my career. But there's literally a point in my life towards the back end of my career where I would find all my happiness just there. And so it was, like you say, it was a distraction for me, but I'd be miserable from the moment I'd wake up, and then I'd get to training good. And it was like a drug. I'd literally get to training, and then I was a different person.
Addictive,
Yeah. And then as soon as I'd finish, as like the drug wore off, and then I'd be miserable again. And I remember, like, when I was in the UK, they were doing an interview on players and talking about who's the most firiest person, who's got bipolar, and like they're just kind of joking about it, right? And one of them brought up, they're like, about being bipolar, and just saying, like, Westo, 1 minute he's good, he's this and that, and the next minute he's storming off training with the shits. And at the time, no one knew what I was going through, but that was me. Like, something ticked me off in training, and it was a standards thing that other people weren't buying into, or because I'd left the Melbourne Storm to go over to the UK, and they were like treating it like it was park footy, and there'd be times I'd allow that frustration to get me so much that I'd be like, I'm fucking out of here, and I would storm out of training.
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, like not do recovery, not do sit, and so people would see that, but then because they don't see it on a deeper level and understand why I was that way, and parts of me, mate, didn't understand at that point either why I was that way. But looking back, it's like other people started to pick up on it because, and essentially that was towards the end of, which led into probably the darkest time of my life.
So did you pick up on it? Because I went through a similar thing where I think I got to 30 and I realised I was super aware of my behaviour, all these triggers. And I started to ask friends and family, have I always been like this? And they go, yeah, since you're a kid, you've always been like this. And I went, and they go, what are you asking me for? And I went, because I'm fucking just realising it now. I'm 30 years old and I'm just realising this is how I act in certain situations. This is how I respond to certain like stresses in my life. And they're like, yeah, we can tell at the start of the day if you're going to be high or low. And I'm like, fuck, why didn't anyone tell me this? And they're like, that's just you. And I'm like, oh man. So then I sort of went down my own road of, why am I like this? Is it a me not being able to regulate my own emotions? Is it something deeper than that? And I've sort of gone down my own path of seeing a psychiatrist, and we've sort of talked about bipolar being on a spectrum, and he's put me on that spectrum, and he's sort of talked to me about how I sort of cope with situations and how I respond to situations and how sort of my brain works. And he's put me on sort of a spectrum, and it's just allowed me a bit more closure around like why I am the way that I am. And not only that though, like how do I manage it in day-to-day life? Before, when I wasn't aware of it, I would just let it consume me. If something triggered me, I would just react. And then I'll think back later and go, why the fuck did I say that? Or why did I do that for? Like that's not me. And I let it go. I just didn't care about it. I just thought that was me. But now I'm more aware of it. You know, I had my fiance sit me down 3 years ago after I had an episode, and she was like, I love you. Like, I want to be with you. But I can't accept this standard. If we're going to have kids together, I can't accept you to go off at our kids the way that you sort of go off with me. And that really hit home because I was like, oh, fuck, like, I've got to sort something else out here. Yeah. Have you gone through something? Was that similar for you? Sort of, were you aware of it?
I wasn't. My ex-wife made me aware of it initially because, first of all, it was affecting our relationship at the time, and I was only 24 at this stage, and I was in Penrith, and I was always aware that I was a moody person, like, you know, like I was kind of like, and my family always same thing, mate, like very similar. Like you ask any of my family, they're like, when Dayne's in a mood, you know about it, you know, and unfortunately, mate, sometimes just the way I look, some people look at me and go, fuck, he looks fucking angry, but I'm not. Unfortunately, that's just the way I've been made. But so there's sometimes I have to be over the top to like for people to
bit more welcoming.
Yeah. But when people get to know me, they they understand how I am, and that's just me. But so it was more. I always knew that I was a bit of a moody bastard at times. But when it started affecting our relationship, because me and my ex-wife never fought, like we both had come from learnt behaviours of sweeping under the rug, so we'd never have too much issues at home, which wasn't healthy. And I didn't know at the time because I thought, how good's this? And my mates used to think, you got the best wife. Like, you never fight, argue, she lets you go whenever you want. Like, and I did, mate. Like, I used to think, I'm living the dream here. But she's like, you need to go get help. And I kind of just was a bit like, ego at the time was like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And so I did. And no one ever knew that I went to get the help. Like, I made no one aware of it and did it. But I went and seen a few people because the first person said that you're depressed and you're riddled with anxiety. And at the time, and I've said this before, like depression for me when I was 24, I always used to relate that to someone that doesn't have much, or, like they're broke or they're living on the streets or they're, and I was like, I was embarrassed to be able to say, to then go to someone and go, hang on a minute, yeah, I'm depressed. Like, I'm earning good money, I'm playing NRL, like I'm married and I've got a kid and another one on the way. Like, I kind of like, how can I be depressed? So the worst decision I did was squash that. So I literally just ignored it. And then continued being the way I was, so essentially things didn't really change. I had that in the back of my mind that I kind of knew that, well, I've got an issue, but no one knows about it. And I just kept it to myself. But that's as far as the awareness was always there, but I just did nothing about it.
Let's go back to sort of your NRL days. And you mentioned sort of what I find really interesting when you had your time at Melbourne Storm and you went over to England and sort of the standards were a little bit different. I've got a few sort of mutual friends that play down at the Storm, and you always hear sort of the culture down at the Storm and playing for Craig and, this thing of no dickhead policy. And I've heard things like their big thing is, good people make good footy players. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like playing for that team? And I would assume when all the, the guns were still there playing. What was that period like? Was it unbelievable?
Oh, it was amazing, mate. I honestly say it's like, put footy aside.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from that club. Like that period that I was there, 3 years, I was just like, I was blown away from just a business point of view, and just like everyone throws culture around all the time. And 90% of it's bullshit until you actually live it and see the real, like you want to see culture, you go down there, and it's no accident what they've done, mate, and success over a long period of time. It all comes back to what they accept and what they don't accept. And mate, for me, it was a funny one. I was reluctantly went there initially. So I was at Penrith and I played probably my best season in 2012, and I still had a year to run, but the Raiders hit me up and offered me this deal that was stupid. And I couldn't believe it, mate, because I was like, Canberra always never picked me in as a kid, never in their things. But then all of a sudden they wanted, and it was like a return home. I was like, we're going to be close to family, and they paraded us around. Like, I'd signed a contract, did it all, mate. But there'd been a few times that players, because you signed with a year to go, June 30, sometimes the players had signed the contract, but then they backflipped on the Raiders and stayed at the club. And it happened a few times at Penrith. So they were worried I was going to do the same thing, but I had to have a bit of a poker face to be like, you guys are paying me almost 3 times what I'm getting paid.
How many zeros are on
that?
Yeah,
I think you've made a mistake. But so I'm not backflipping. And but me being honest, I went to Ivan straight away and I said, listen, mate, I've signed a deal to go to Canberra. And he was okay with it, but back then I knew straight away he wasn't going to play me in first grade at Penrith. But I was like, well, I will sit in reserve grade all year. I don't care because I'm looking after my family financially. It's going to be great. And then, like, March the following year, my manager rings me and he's on a cruise and he's like, mate, just ringing. It was breaking up. And he's like, Canberra pulled the deal and da-da. And I'm thinking, how they can't pull it off, signed it, da-da. And anyway, long story short, he's like, but Melbourne are keen. They want to get you there immediately. And I was just like, hang on a minute. What's going on here?
I just had the homecoming.
Yeah. And then next minute it kind of cut out and I couldn't get hold of him and I was furious. Anyway, because at the time, mate, it was all a financial point. I was at a point in my career, I'm like, I've just jumped on board of like some income that I've just been waiting for, and anyway, so I was like, we got to strike while iron's hot, and it broke up, and then eventually got hold of him, and I rang Dave Fern, who was the coach at the time, and how they got me was you have to lodge the contract within 2 weeks of it being signed, and Don Fern, who's the CEO, said I'll sit it in my top drawer. And at June 30 comes, I'll then lodge it. So he knew what he was doing. So he was playing both sides.
Both sides.
If they still wanted me, they would have just said, oh, sorry, we're just going to update the contract and re-sign it. But if they didn't, technically, and that was my manager's fault. We should have had that lodge. But
some shady shit that goes
on. It was,
there,
mate. Yeah, and it's not the
still
only
happens.
Thing. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But then it like a blessing, mate. And when I look at it now, I'm like, it all happens for a reason. And I'm just so grateful that did happen. When I was in it, I was just like, I was furious and reluctantly flying to Melbourne to like meet with Craig and Frank Panisi. And I was a bit in awe of him to begin with, like most people are. But great guy, sat there, had coffee, talked about what he wanted and went back and pretty much signed it. And then within like a week, like I'd moved down there. Mum was living in Melbourne, my stepdad at the time. So the transition was not too bad. We could move straight in with Mum and we had to because they weren't paying me much money. And a lot of people go to Melbourne, you take unders just to be there, mate.
Just be a good footy player,
yeah,
good person, yeah.
And well, you want to be a part of that club. People will take a cut, but no one knows that until they're there. So for me, mate, I went there and I was like, the funny moment when I first met Craig was he was lovely at coffee. He was like, real welcoming, But then when I started training, blank me, eh? And I was like, just same guy. And like went weeks and I was mad paranoid, eh? And I was just like, he's not talking to me, hardly says hello to me. And then about a month, I reckon, then he started like being like joking with me and like taking the piss out of me and shit. And then being there a few years, I noticed that's what he does with everyone. Right. And so like a new player, it's like his opportunity to kind of just watch from afar, see what you like. And then when he builds that trust and respect, that's when he becomes a bit friendly with you.
So it's ultimate mind games. And
yeah, a little bit, mate. But it's definitely a place, mate, where you just automatically want to buy into what they're about. You don't want to – the standards are set by the club initially from the get-go. The fabric of that club is already, and the players keep that culture going. It's not the staff. And that's what – it's like you don't want to let your teammate down. And it's literally like – yeah, that's all it is. And essentially it's not someone telling, Westo, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. It's your own players and you do not want to let them down.
Yeah. I saw something and it was like what I love about Melbourne. So I think other clubs are trying to do it now too, but if it's a new signing, it doesn't matter if you're, on $1 million, you're on $100,000, you do that a couple of months of labour. Labour work.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
What did you have to do?
Mate, I was we're doing like first week we're doing like landscaping and stuff, and then we're working with this one guy on a building site, and the first week was all right. The reason they do 2 weeks, which is like anything, you do a week, like 5 days, you're like, that was all right. You get to Sunday afternoon, you're like, fuck, I'll do this again. And for a lot of like, mate, when I went there, like I was like 26, 27, I'd done some like labour before, like I'd worked before and whatnot here and there. But there's some kids that come from school into that. Fuck, it'd be a rude shock.
It would be. Because you labour all through the day and then you do the training
Well,
in the
we train
afternoon.
first in the
Or
morning.
train
like 4 o'clock in the morning. You got weights in the morning, and then you leave, you go straight to the work site. And then, then come back.
What do you reckon he does that?
I think there's a couple of parts to it, mate. Like I think to make you grateful for what you got. I think plays a big part of it, because there's a lot of it when there's such a high standard at that club, and then he doesn't see that standard getting played out. It's a great opportunity to have a reality check, to be like, what you're doing in November and December, you could be doing that instead. But you're here getting paid a shit ton of money. Fucking do your job. And it's simple, mate, but it's just like, that's a reality for a lot of, and there's a lot of young kids, mate, that come through this day and age, a generational thing, where they finish high school, mate, the minimum wage is about 140 grand in the NRL now.
It's ridiculous,
It's
isn't
crazy,
it? That is
mate.
crazy.
So like, when I finished, 37.5 grand was minimum wage when I finished school. Yeah. And back then, and it was still like, then you're like, oh, fuck, how good is it? But 140 grand, mate. Like, so straight away, it's not the kid's fault, but the kids are straight away, there's an ego to that straight away. Like, I'm earning 140 grand, and that's just minimum. There could be, if you're half decent, you're probably earning 200 plus, and you're not even 18.
It's crazy, because I remember Robert Toyer that signed with the Roosters straight out of Nudgee College. He signed a $3 million deal, and he's never played first grade before, and he's
crazy,
17 years old. The Roosters just locked him up, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Oh, mate, that's mental.
That's mental, eh?
And I'm okay with it if they've got support around them, mate. Player managers have always been a bit of a frustration for me, because I went through a bit of issues with them personally, but I can't understand how, if there's a $3 million contract and a manager sort that out, the amount of money he gets from just that one, but they've got so many, because that's how they make all their money. But towards the end, I used to do my own contracts, because like, I feel comfortable sitting down. It was awkward at times, but I feel comfortable as a man writing an email, back forth, sit down, have a coffee, nut it out, like whatever. And some people don't, but I think if we go back to the minimum wage, 140 grand, I'm okay if that kid gets 50 grand in his bank account and the rest of it goes in a trust fund, or it's like set up right in the right ways. Because, mate, I've seen blokes that earned 3-4 times I did in my career, play Origin for Australia, and don't have anything to show for it. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's one thing to earn the money, but if you're not doing the right thing with it, and it's controlling your life, and you're just pissing it up the wall, or trying to, buy all these materialistic things, it's like, what's the point of it? You just wasted it all away.
Yeah, especially, and what I gathered from when I was playing too, it's, I don't know if you felt this when you were 20 or 21, it's just like, you think this is going to last forever. When I was 20, got a contract, I was like, 30 is so far down the road. Being a 30-year-old is so far down the road. Like, I don't have to think about that now. And you just live in the moment, and you just do what you want. You don't think about future Elliot. You just do what you want. And then all of a sudden you get to 29 and you go, fuck, I haven't really got much, So that's like the danger with those kids now, is just like, I'm blown away by that. The minimum wage, and I'm thinking that there has to be some sort of safety net set up for them that, like you said, that they can't just all spend their money, or they even learn about like how to invest, or into property or something like that. They can use their money wisely rather than just getting on the piss and throwing it down the drain.
Yeah, mate. And there would be people out there doing the right thing, but just as a collective, I just always think, it's just a lot. But the other side to your question about the army camp, Craig, it's a great opportunity for Craig to see people how they are when they're fatigued. So Craig will always explain that his most favourite players are the ones that aren't flashy, the ones like the Ryan Hinchcliffe, Dale Finucane, like all these guys that will do all the dirty work, bust it up, but they'll do all the things that you don't see, all the little 1%ers that they love at Melbourne. There's no stat on it. You know what I mean? Like, and and that character is built in tough times. When you face an adversity, when you're fatigued, you can either make a coward of you or you can literally thrive through it. And these guys, and I think the army camp, man, like your 3 days are hardly any sleep at all. And so it's a good test for him to see how your character is in that time.
I love that because I talked to some of my mutual friends and I'll like, why do you got this guy on your team? He's not fast. He's not fucking. He goes, yeah, but he doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter if it's the first minute or the 80th minute. He does not stop the whole game. He might not be the quickest or the strongest or whatever, the fittest.
Yeah.
But he will not stop the whole entire game. You need people like that in your team. Yeah.
And Craig's almost moulded that position. Like Dallas Johnson was a gun of it when he did it.
Weapon.
Hinchy took over him and Dale came. They're all the same kind of player. But just, yeah, Josh King is down there at the moment playing front row, but he's another one. It's just like he just shows up, just turns up like...
takes all the hard carries.
Oh, yeah. And then gets busted for it like Dale. Far out. I roomed with Dale when I was
did
there.
you?
Yeah.
Oh,
And,
good fella.
Champion,
Yeah,
mate.
yeah.
But yeah, we had some good times. But yeah, like, and I think that's another part of it because Craig will often say, not the army camp, but just be like, I want to see how well you're going when you're under fatigue. Like that's what they're always like training, mate. My first session there, we did a ball work session, and I was like, oh, this will be all right, cruisy walk in the park, because I went mid-season, so I missed the first pre-season, and mate, at the end of it, I was fucking gassed, eh? Because all the drills 100 mile an hour. They train how they play,
Yeah.
like, and there's no rest in between. And mate, at the end you can see again, you see firsthand the standards is second to none, mate. Like I haven't, obviously that's where I finished, but all the standards that before that at other clubs I'd been at, I just was so far apart.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah.
and I reckon there's clubs catching up now. I reckon Penrith are probably where Melbourne are. Like they're kind of evolving into that, you know, and again, without seeing what they do day to day, but you don't have the success Penrith have at the moment without doing what probably Melbourne do at training. So, but yeah, it's incredible club, but I've got a lot of friends there, like Dan DePasqua, who's the head of strength there. He's one of my best mates and formed a friendship pretty much through injury when I was down there, and just a quality guy that does. And he's won Clubman of the Year like 4 years in a row. Or it's just crazy, mate. Like he just goes over and beyond his role to help people, and he's a guy that I always, if I'm struggling with something or I need something, I'll ring him first, and he's sometimes doesn't give me the answer, but he'll have a discussion where makes it a lot clearer that what I should be doing, and he's always said, if I've made you think, I've done my job. And I love that. And
did you walk away? You didn't give me any fucking
yeah,
answers,
I
though.
know. But he's like, well, essentially, you know the answer.
Yeah.
You just got to work out, you know, and get rid of, you know, the stuff you don't need to look at, and you find it. But
let's talk about your debut. Where did you debut, and what was that week like? You know, finding out and sort of realizing, you know, all that hard work and all the sacrifice and years of, you know, training and stuff has sort of come to this one moment.
Well, I tell the story, mate, because like 2 weeks before, I got dropped from reserve grade. So the year before, the coach at the time was like, we don't have a top 25 spot for the next year. And I was 19, and I was like, hang on a minute, like this is meant to go forever. And then he got sacked, and then Ricky Stewart came, and then they're like, we'll give him an opportunity for a preseason. So I was pretty much on a train and trial. I was still getting paid, but I had the preseason to prove myself. And then my first trial, Sticky was all over me. And like the boys were into me like, oh, Westo, his favourite child, da. And then I was just, I don't know. I did a few things in that game that kind of surprised myself. And then Sticky just like grew fond of me, mate. And he was just like a big fan. And then a few weeks into the season, I was playing reserve grade. And then I just wasn't going great. And then I was big at looking at the big league, and I was like jersey 21 in Premier League, and I was like, shit, I'm not playing this week. It's fucking round 4. Anyway, so I went to train, and we used to have club sessions, and I think we played Monday night, so like it's Thursday, and all the forwards are out the back, and then whatnot, and Dave Gillespie come and did a defensive session, and Ben Ross, who I lived with for a period of time, he was like the new signing at the club and getting paid money and whatever. And because we knew each other, I partnered up with him. And we had a bit of a falling out over our time, but I was just ripping into him, and then Sticky stopped the session after about 10 minutes and blew off, like went off his head, and he's just like, the only bloke having to go here is fucking Westo, and he just put me on show, which I was loving inside, but he's just like, mate, if you defend like that in the next few weeks, you'll be playing in my team, and I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm not playing reserve grade this week, and then this bloke's telling me if I go well, I'll play NRL, so we went out on the field and to do an opposed session, and Jimmy Dimmick was our Premier League coach, and he said, Jimmy, Westo's starting front row for you guys this week. And so I was like, well, at least I'm playing this week in reserve grade. The following week we had the bye, so I usually would go home to Goulburn or whatnot, and I had the car packed Friday Arvo, and we just had to do weights and a quick conditioning session, and then that was it. And then I was jumping in my car and going, and finished weights, and Tony McFadden, Sticky's brother-in-law, was the trainer, and he come in, he's like, Westo, when you finish weights, you can go home. And I was like, fuck yeah, I don't want to do fitness. And he goes, but you're going to come back and train tomorrow. And I was like, fuck. And he's like, you're 18th man. And, mate, I wasn't pumped about it because back then 18th man never really got on. Yeah. So I was just like, oh, okay then. And he's like, so, mate, you got training, Flano will ring you, assistant coach at the time, Shane Flanagan. And so once it kind of got over the fact I wasn't going home, I kind of started setting in like, hang on a minute, like I'm only one injury away from potentially playing here. And I go to training the next day, and Reece Williams was under an injury cloud, and Reece was someone that he's a young fella as well. He's only a year older than me, but he's debuted at like 17. And tough bloke, mate, and he wouldn't let anyone get
his spot.
Nah.
No, is he not giving it up?
No, he wasn't, mate. And I was like, he's not going to not play. If he sees someone else is going to, not that I'd take his spot, but he just is that kind of guy. He just would have pushed through. And so when I knew it was him, I was like, anyway, finished the session, didn't really have much involvement like in the main squad. And then Gal come out of the tunnel and he's like, you're in. And I was like, bullshit. He goes, yeah, mate. And then next minute, Flano walked past and said, congratulations, mate, you're in. Give me a tip sheet. Sticky shook my hand and like just blasé, mate. Like there wasn't like this formalness about it. It was just like, good on you, mate. I'll chat to you tomorrow. And I kind of had the sheet in my hand. I was kind of like walking around, and Shark Park's a bit of a ghost town. And I was just kind of like, okay. Got me stuff, and I drove home, and I was like, just started like screaming in the car, like, how good was this? And then it like, because it happened all so quick, I didn't have time to prepare for it. Like family are in Goulburn's 2 hours away, so I rang them, and everyone could be there for it. We played at Campbelltown against the Tigers Sunday afternoon, Channel 9 game, and we ended up getting beat in extra time. Lance Thompson, the late Lance Thompson, gave a penalty away pretty much in front. Benji kicked a penalty goal, but I didn't get on until like the second half, but the nervousness, mate, of just waiting to get on. I burned so much energy. But it was such a cool experience, mate, and a pinch yourself moment. Like, because I was such a footy nerd growing up, I was kind of like, wow, like I'm actually get to be out there on TV like I watched as a kid all my life, and it's pretty cool, mate.
Was there a welcome to the NRL moment where, because you obviously when you get there, you could be a gun from your town, but you get to the NRL, everyone is guns. Was there a moment when you got to like you played a game and it was like a sort of a welcome to the NRL moment? I don't know, getting hit or running into a brick wall or anything?
Not that I can remember, mate, but there's a few times. I remember trying to fly out of the line, hit Petro Sivnasiva when I was a young bloke. And,
the worst person.
Oh, mate.
Granite.
I played with Pat at Penrith.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
And, mate, he was an idol of mine growing up.
Yeah, of course.
And I remember it was in a trial in Cairns, and I like come from the outside, like blind shotting him. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, if I knock this bloke over, like someone's gonna be carrying on how good I am. And mate, he was like brick wall, just granite, and like it knocked me. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, I've come off second best. And the only other time, like where I was Flano, in that first year of first grade, I never tackled low. Like I don't have a technique to get low and like technical way to tackle. It'd always be a bear hug or up top kind of tackle. Yeah. And against Melbourne, I remember Garrett Crossman, he's a big guy, and I tried to take him low, mate, out cold. There's a photo of me coming off, like, and I was just in Flano, like, instead of, are you okay? He's like, what the fuck are you doing that for? You never tackle low. When have we taught you to tackle around the knees? And, but other than that, mate, like, you know, we used to, back then, though, you get knocked out. It's pretty dangerous. You'd get knocked out like that game, I'm pretty sure I come back on, and there's the times where you'd get knocked out, but because no one's monitoring it, if you shook it off and you just kept going,
If you got up, you could play.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%, mate. And you don't want to come off.
Yeah,
Like even
yeah.
even this day, when you see players have to come off, like they're filthy because it's natural. You don't. But with the science and the studies all behind it, mate, it is pretty scary.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
But yeah, mate, it's other than that, mate,
Yeah.
not really. But I remember in reserve grade because back then Premier League was. If you got dropped from first grade, you'd play Premier League. So Premier League was pretty tough competition. And I remember Luke DeVico, he used to play at the Raiders, ended up at Newcastle the back end of his career. And I was 18 playing Premier League and he was back and I was like, holy shit. Like, and I was only telling this story the other day. I was like, you're actually playing against a bloke that's almost 30 years old. Like, and he's a veteran of the game. And, you know, you come across and always that was a good challenge. And I suppose for us coming through, you're playing against first graders every week. So the actual jump up to first grade is not as hard as I reckon under 20s to reserve grade because you're playing against 17, 18, 19-year-olds all the same. But then Premier League, it's
That
playing
gap's a
against
bit
men
closer.
straight away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found it easier to play first grade than play Premier League because it's more technical. You just do your job, and you know
Everyone's in the right spots. You don't have to sort of worry about anyone else.
Nah.
You just worry about your own job. You talked about sort of sitting on the bench and dealing with nerves and stuff like that, and the mental side of footy for me, looking back on it now, is something that I reckon I really struggled with. I kind of wish I had a mindset coach or someone sort of directing me in terms of managing my my stresses and the pressure I was putting on myself. How did you deal with that? Looking back on it now, is it something you managed quite well, or like dealing with pressure, but also overcoming that and performing?
Mate, it was as soon as I touched the ball, I was good. So especially when I was in the UK, I'd start in Penrith. I was starting most games. So the energy, if I wasn't sitting on the bench, the energy, as soon as I run out, I used to love that. Like run out and the energy's and I'm just waiting for the kickoff. And I used to love that run off the kickoff. Yeah, loved it, mate. And and yeah, so for me it was like once that's done, all that nervous energy's gone now. Like so it's done. But see, sitting on the bench, I used to be like, I'd go in and fucking go to the toilet that much, mate. I'd be just pissing all the time. And it'd just be nervous energy, mate. Just up, go again. And then I don't know, there's no, I try to relax, but you never know when you're going on. That's the hardest thing. And for someone like me who loves structure, loves to be organised and a lot of the time, mate, I just have to,
because you had to be on.
Yeah,
you couldn't afford to relax on the bench because 1 minute could go by and go, oh, you're on, and you're like, oh fuck.
But then too, mate, like there's just different personalities. Like you see some players, mate, just so rat's ass. Like Cameron Munster, one of the best players in the game, mate. You see him around training and game day, you're like, how are you about to go out and play?
Yeah, you ready for a game? Or you just going to the pub? Like, what's going on?
So, like, everyone's different, but that works for them.
I love that, though, eh?
Yeah.
Like, I love those different personalities and characters that people just they need to be headbutting a wall. And then some people are like, they're singing, and you're just like, are we all ready here?
Yeah. And so, so it's everyone's kind of different in that sense. And I think a lot of my personality comes out. I'm a bit of a stressor, not a bit of a stressor, I'm a stressor. But it's the unknown too. But then the performance anxiety of like, I need to be doing my job here. And it's so replaying what I need to do and that. But me and Felice Kafusi, when we were at Melbourne, we were both kind of coming off the bench together in the front row and both struggled with our fitness. And we found Craig was always like, he's coming off the bench, but then you aren't lasting very long before you're starting to fatigue. And our trainers had to put through a bit of a program for us on the sideline. So to actually try and blow us out.
Get the second win.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Which was interesting, mate. And it worked a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Melbourne probably more structured than other clubs where we kind of had an idea when we're going to go on. So they would say, like, Wester, you're probably not going to go on to the second half around the 50th minute. So
they're that detailed. Right.
So the plan that they had, things can change, mate. Like if there's an injury or something happens, that changes. But if everything going perfect, that's how they'd say it. So Craig would look at that and go, well, Westo needs a blowout, just for half time. And then when he comes back, give him, whatever. And then, so we had to manage that and just found that interesting. But it's right though, because you sit there, and if you are struggling, you're not a fitness freak like we weren't. Big guys, you kind of, there are times when you're on the field, you get that second win. But
Yeah.
for us, because we're only short interchange forwards, we might be on there for 15, 20 minutes, and they're pulling us off anyway. So you got to try and make the most of that.
That time frame.
Yeah, so you almost want
Yeah.
your second win
Yeah.
in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, so then you can. But
Go on.
yeah, it's hard, mate. I think I think the mindset, coaches, and all that, whatever works for you, mate. You know, like I've always said that with anything, it's like find out what works for you, whether it's your diet, mindset, you know, anything. It's just like, and stick to it, you know, because if it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, if it works for you and gets you in that mindset, that's works.
What about your relationship with fear? Is fear something that you really struggle with playing or in your life? Is it something that held you back at all? Or did you use it as a motivator?
Bit of both, mate. Like I suppose my fears changed over time, like for different things. My biggest fear right now, as a father and a husband, would be like losing my family. Like, you know, like me and my wife going through like some stuff like on and off for years, mate. And my biggest fear would be that she would leave me one day. Like, and that's an abandonment issue that I've had from a young age, which caused a lot of my mental health issues. But I suppose apart from my family, a big part of my fear, I've always tried to be perfect, mate. Like, you know, it's been a real issue for me. I can't just do something. I'm like, well, like even I know this is small, but my wife will give me shit about putting something on my Instagram story, and she goes, "Are you still doing that?" And it's just one photo, and I'm like, I just don't know how to position the writing. Sometimes I don't know. I look at it, I'm like, that doesn't look good. So who cares? And no one cares. But like that's just an example. Like sometimes it's like little crap like that. But it, like I'm in no rush. I'm not doing anything. But there are times where I've felt like that perfectionism has, you know, hindered my life a little bit. But I suppose there's always fear as a player that you don't want it to end, or I'm not going to make it, you know, or whatnot. And I had that early on, and then, you know, within 6 months I played NRL. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's, as a father, mate, and again, going through a bit of a, if I'm being truly honest, mate, going through something right now, like that's, like my kids left about 6 months ago. Like they live with their mum now full time. That was challenging. That's like really challenging for me, even though they live in Currumbin. That's hard. And I suppose early on, my fear was, you know, they've got so much of an influence from their mum and other people about who I am, and I'll let that affect me for a long time. But my faith, mate, and my foundation in Christ has allowed me to remove fear from that, and to know that I am a good person, I am loved, and like I have great value to add to those two boys. And despite what anyone might say about me, I just got to trust that they know that they see it, and I know they do, mate. Like, but the biggest thing for me, if I'm leaning on fear too much, I'm not trusting God. Yeah, and that's the only way I can look at it, mate. From my point of view, everyone's different, and I know not everyone has a faith, but essentially that it is, you know, because it's easy for me in those times, especially at the moment, to be like, why me? Like, why am I going through this? Like, I've gave my life to Christ. I'm doing the right things. I'm doing all this. And it's like, why am I still getting attacked? And from a spiritual point of view, mate, it's like the enemy doesn't want to see what I'm doing right now. Doesn't want to see me in a happy marriage. Doesn't want to see all this. And people will understand it who have a faith that worldly people don't, you know, like, and that's okay. But for me, mate, I just need to have full trust that I will see the light at the end of this tunnel that I'm going through at the moment. And when I didn't have Christ, I couldn't, mate, which obviously almost cost me my life. But now I've got something so solid in my life that I'm like, I don't care what you throw at me. Like, we will find a way. And every time we've got through it. Like, and there's no two ways about it. So I think it's a long-winded answer, mate. But essentially, mate, my fear is replaced by Christ. It's just knowing my faith in Him.
I love that, and we will touch on your faith a little bit later on. But you mentioned sort of your struggles, sort of your mental well-being, you know, during your days playing NRL and sort of afterwards as well. If you're happy to, can you share, you know, how much you were really battling on the inside?
Yeah, mate. I'm always happy like sharing this. It's like early on, I wouldn't say I struggled with it, but when it was real raw, mate, I mean, it's still emotional, obviously, but I share it for the same reasons you're doing what you're doing, mate. To be vulnerable and open with other people, because there's people listening right now that mightn't have walked my exact journey, but they understand the feeling and the pain, the pressure, like especially fathers, like, people out there that are expected to be a provider and do this. And from an external point of view, mate, people see me as this big, strong, masculine guy that like could overcome anything. And mate, there's times where I'm weak as. And like, I think it's important because I didn't have that modeled to me as a kid. It's important to see the kids see me cry, the kids see me broken, and for me to articulate that to them that it's okay. Because if my dad, who's big and strong, can do that, well, I can do that too. And I think that's one of my biggest attributes, mate. Like to actually lean on how I look, because a lot of people would think that, just go, well, he could overcome anything. Look at the size of him. It's not about that, And for me, mate, like I battled through that time from like when I was 24, went to Melbourne after my time at Penrith, and I was probably in a better mental state at Melbourne, probably more so for my surroundings because of the people I had there. But I'd still have my days. I went to the UK, mate, and when I went to the UK, you're treated like a bit of a like hero over there, and you're an NRL player. Like I wasn't a superstar or anything, though. You go to these little towns in the UK, and mate, I love my time in the UK. I loved it, but you go over there and they make a big deal about it, and so when I went over there's expectation for me to do well, and then they'll pay me the amount of money that I had an expectation that I had to. I didn't want to go over there and be a flop. So I went over and loved it, and really bought into the town, and was involved in multiple things. I met a young kid, and this is kind of where my community stuff kind of birthed a lot. When I was at Melbourne, I was doing some charity work with a children's hospital, and so I worked in the Aboriginal unit there, and like just doing some volunteer stuff with the kids there, and which is initially sparked. I just wanted to do something. I spent a lot of time with the welfare guys at Melbourne, built strong relationships, and then he's like, they're always looking for help there. And so that's where initially, I suppose, at Melbourne sparked that I want to help. Like I want to be able to be somewhere, even if it's as small as just coming, like little kids see the Melbourne logo or an NRL logo, they don't care who you are, what you do. They just, yeah. So, mate, that was like special. So when I went to the UK, I got asked to go out to a hospital visit, and I met this young kid, Ben, and he's born with cerebral palsy. He just got diagnosed with cancer, and the most happiest kid you'll ever meet, mate. I don't think I ever seen him like cry. I don't think he was so positive, and I walked away from that like I was broken, mate, after seeing him. I couldn't understand how someone so like, and you put things in perspective, mate. Like this kid never walk, and he'll never walk again, and he's been in a wheelchair for as long as he's known, and he's just been diagnosed with cancer, and he's so upbeat. And in that first meeting with him, mate, he's like, I just can't wait to overcome this. I'm going to beat this, and then I want to go on a holiday to Jamaica with my family. And I was just blown away, eh? And I left the hospital that day, and I was just like, I need to do something about that. Like, I just can't, like, I don't know. There's just something about me. It's just like, I just can't let that kid, there's something special there, mate. And so long story short, I spoke to one of my mates who's a graphic designer and become real close with him. And I was like, I need to start this business. I said, I want to start Ben's Wish, and I want to get him and his family to Jamaica. And everyone was kind of a bit like, how are you going to do it? This, that, and the other. Mate, we ended up raising £50,000.
Wow.
And we had like warm-up shirts designed, like, and then we'd raffle them off, like auction them off after, and we had like runs, like my mate, who's the graphic designer, come up with like, got medals done, and like from Manchester to Leigh and back, like all these different things, mate. And it just grew and grew, and the whole community got behind it, mate. And he beat cancer, like, and they didn't end up going to Jamaica. I think he changed his destination, but it was just cool, mate, to just kind of get into that. And for me, it was a bit of a distraction as well, because obviously I was battling my own stuff. And I've always said this a lot. You find a lot of people who are battling find it easy to help other people because it takes the attention off themselves. But I wouldn't change that because, you know, you see the impact you make to that humble family that, you know, and so I had that and that kept me busy. So if I wasn't playing, I was doing that. So I didn't have a lot of downtime, which I don't know if I was doing all this because I just needed to be busy because I didn't want to sit in my own thoughts. But as soon as I get my own thoughts, mate, just was in a dark place. And it was the first time I'd kind of got to that point where I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like even but then I'd go to the hospital, I'd go and do something positive and then that would just go away. But it got to a point, mate, where I was literally like we were talking about before, like going to training. Once I got there and I knew what I was doing, great. But as soon as I'd leave, just straight and miserable, like again. And I was like, this is the same patterns that I had when I was 24. And so these same patterns kept coming up again, but it kept getting darker and darker. My relationship with my ex-wife was, you know, getting worse. And on the surface, it didn't look so bad, but there was just no connection. There was no communication. I was literally living a single life. Mate, I was playing up. I was, you know, going out partying, but then doing all this with 2 kids, like a wife at home, but then performing like no tomorrow on the field. Like, and I was just like, I mean, I've never played better footy than I'm doing right now. So I could never fathom. I'm like, I'm in the darkest place I've ever been. I'm carrying on. I'm not proud of the man I am behind closed doors. And then after games, when I go out, I'd be a completely different person, mate. I'd carry on like I wasn't married. I had no kids, and I had the ability to compartmentalize my life. And again, I don't say this proudly, but this is how I got through it. And I used to think that I was this great father, husband, person in the community, but then that could get parked to be this egotistical, like superstar in a lot of people's eyes when I was either playing or out in the drink and chasing women. And it kept growing and growing because I could do it, you know. And so my ego is telling me, why stop?
Why fix what's not broken?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, well, just keep going. And so it got to a point, mate, where all that stuff's just physical. And it was all like to build my ego, and it was all just to, and again, though, still at this point, I don't truly understand who I am and why I am that way, you know. So you got to remember, like, I'm almost 30 years old and I'm still doing this. I'm still covering it up. I'm still masking everything. But it got to a point, mate, where that 2016, I was playing good footy, and towards the back end, mate, I just hit a moment where I was just like, I'd wake up so ashamed of who I was, and just thought about suicide all the time, mate. Like I was just like being so planned and so structured about things. I was just like, I don't deserve to be here anymore. Like I felt so guilty for what I was doing. But then soon as this compartmentalization come into my mind, I'd literally, as small as just get out of bed. As soon as I was out of bed and then something like distracted me, I was back on. But the pattern just kept going, mate. Like it was the first thing I thought about every morning. Like I'd open my eyes, and that went on for such a long time. But at the end of that year, I won every award at the presentation. They made a big song and dance. I signed a 3-year deal at the presentation, and I was only telling my wife about it the other day. She was asking questions about it, and I was just like, I was so miserable. Like I didn't care. Like then and there, receiving it, this, that, and the other, but it gave me no fulfillment. And I was like, if I didn't think there was signs that I had issues, like then and there, I was like, you can't even find fulfillment in like this stuff. You should be over the moon.
Yeah, your passion, what you really
Yeah.
love, you just didn't really fill you up.
No. And so that was kind of an early indicator to be like, okay, and people started noticing, and we spoke before about players and that, thinking like, you know, Westo's got bipolar and this, that, and the other, but I still was masking it. I was still partying, and I got injured. I needed surgery, and then went on like a Europe holiday with my wife, and then come back, and just things were never the same, and the same patterns. I never got fit. The second year in the Super League, I just wasn't the same player, and eventually it deteriorated to a point where my wife was just like, she's done, and she went home to passed away. She's from the Gold Coast, and I was due to get surgery at the end of that year, and I'd still had 3 years to run this contract, which I knew I wouldn't see out just the way I was. But financially. I was like, I have to, like, and I was hoping they'd come back, and she's like, I'm not coming back. And then I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm done. I'm not. And I was like, oh, fuck. So I was in the UK, and I literally had this house to pack up, like career done. Like it was just all happened at once, mate. You know, and my old man was visiting at the time, which I was grateful for, so he could help me with that transition a bit. But that time, mate, it was awful. And I suppose as an athlete, like in general, transition's hard when you finish. Like so many people go through it at different levels. I get it, but to then don't really have time to like, and a lot of people will go, well, I'm retiring at the end of this year, or this will be my last contract. So there's some type of clarity around it. And there's a lot that aren't, like injury will pull that short, or something happened, in my case, this, and it made it really difficult for me mentally to kind of go, now I don't even know what's next. Like my mind was so overwhelming that, and then I come here to the Gold Coast, trying to get back with my ex-wife, and just didn't want a bar of it, and then that's when the spiral just kept getting worse.
You mentioned there, there's so many points of sort of how, that's how I sort of cope with it too, was just the drinking and the drugs and the partying. That's just the footy culture that I didn't enjoy, but it's something that you just did as the team.
Yeah.
You just followed suit. Rugby league's such a tough alpha male sport that sort of any sort of vulnerability is seen as a weakness. Could you talk about it with anyone? Or was it everything kept a secret?
Yeah, everything was a secret, mate. Even going back there, mate, there's a lot of, my wife and I were, funny enough, our 5th wedding anniversary the other night, went out to dinner, and she started asking me questions of my past, and I'm like, I'm not good asking her about her past. So I'm like, I don't want to know about it. Where she's interested. And so like, it started us like talking about different stuff, but I'm like, a lot of it's a blur, mate, for me. Like, and I don't know if it's a renewing from my mind, my heart with Christ, or what, but when I look back and I try and take myself to them times, there are parts of me that I'm so unsure, but I know there was never a point where, I not with the players. So, I will say this. I met a guy called Simon, who's one of my best mates, who's like a father figure for me over there. So he was really good mates with Mickey Hyam, who was the captain at our club. Mickey was like almost 40, still playing, mate. He's an absolute legend over there. And he owned a gym over there, and I used to go and hang out with Mickey and while they trained and whatnot. And Simon, I met Simon, and Simon had gone through hell, mate. Like he'd been married and found out that his wife was cheating on him for like 7 years or something, and she had kids, like almost newborns when they met. So he decided he'll raise them like his own, and they won't have children. So he missed out on that, and then years down the track, find out what happened, mate. And the first time I met Simon, he told me all this. So he literally sat there and we had a coffee, and he told me his life story. And I remember coming away from that just going, that's where friendship was birthed, mate. And from his vulnerability, I was drawn to him all the time. And we built a friendship where he knew everything about me, and he was someone I'd go to share what was going on. He knew everything about me. He'd probably know more about me than my ex-wife did at the time. And so he was someone that I could lean on because we shared similar feelings, like, and emotions of what we were going through. So, and yeah, so the footy side of it, it wasn't there, mate. Like, like you wouldn't do that, and that's just how it was. But Simon helped me a lot through a lot of times, and it was really hard to leave him, mate. When I left the UK, it was the most emotional, like, goodbye that I've ever had in my life. Like, and he was rattled, and to a point, mate, where it's like there's attributes of him that I'm like, he's literally like my father, like how I've always wanted my own father to be, but from a team point, you just never spoke about it.
And how deep and dark do those inner thoughts take you? I mean, did you experience a rock bottom?
I did when I come back here.
You did.
So when I come back, obviously I was trying to be, and mate, I was saying to Lydia the other day, my wife, I was like, I got so sick. Like this, and even back then you get so blinded by how you actually feel like you are. Like there's photos of me at Melbourne, like I was pissed, and I'm with Andrew Voss and I think Greg Alexander in the Fox commentary box, like just carrying on. But there's a photo of me. I'm in a suit and mate, I look so gaunt. Like I would have lucky to be 90 odd kilo.
Really?
And but I never seen it then. Like I would have looked at myself and gone, oh, I look all right. But I look back now, mate, and I was so sick. Like I just let it all just drain me. Like I just wasn't the person I was. But I still was. I went from like accepting that I'm going to go through a divorce, but I was still getting paid money. I was almost acting like an injured player because I was still getting paid and I was still living the lifestyle of a rugby league player. And eventually, like, went through this whole cycle of the same thing: drugs, alcohol, chasing women, and I'd live by myself. I'd have the kids week on, week off. But mate, the week I didn't have them, I'd be out every weekend in Burleigh, and I was around a crowd of people that like were doing the exact same thing, and I wasn't. I enjoyed those times when I was doing it, but then after it, I was just like so down, mate. And because I'd had the issues and I still haven't resolved why I am the way I am, I would be in such a depressive state for 4 or 5 days. And most people are when they go on a bender or whatever anyway. But with my added mental issues on top of that, like, mate, not a good place to be. I used to hate going to bed. Like, I used to hate going into that room because I knew that feeling of when I'm in bed and when I get up, I don't want to get up. It was such a battle, mate, like going home all the time and then of a morning trying to get out. There's times I just wouldn't want to leave the bedroom because I just didn't want to face. I'd get so much social anxiety about seeing people. I wouldn't even know what I'm going through, but just didn't want to see anyone. And so I literally would sometimes go to work, do what I had to do, and then just get out. And no one knew what I was doing. But I was fortunate, mate. At the end, well, I worked with the NRL when I finished first, and I was lucky. I worked in Northern New South Wales, and I had it to a point where I had so much programs in schools running that I could employ a casual staff to do my work, and I sat at home.
Really?
Yeah, and no one and everyone was okay with it because they were making money. You know, like, and there was no red flags. We're like, hang on a minute, why is Max doing all this work for Westo? Look, Westo's thriving. I'm good at being a manager. I know how to do all that stuff, but I could do it from my own comfort. I didn't have to go and see anyone. And so that almost fell into, well, I don't have to leave. I can literally do this job because I hated going to schools. I didn't want to teach kids how to play footy anymore. I was just so over rugby league. And but couple of rock bottoms, mate. The first was, I suppose, I was doing the whole going out the same thing in Burleigh. One of my good mates, Sean, who I've known from almost 20 years at the Cowboys when I was there, and he was in the under-20s, and such a loyal friend that's been through my journey the whole way, mate. You know, like, in first bloke to reach out if I need something, and I just can rely on him. And the courage he showed, mate, in this time to actually front me and told me to wake up. And he's like, mate, you need to fucking wake up. And I was just like, fuck. And sobered me, mate, like literally instantly sobered me. He was just sick of seeing me, like, all these people in Burleigh pat me on the back and carrying on like, Westo's this, Westo's that. And when Maloney like went off this one night, he's like, you don't even fucking know Westo. You have no idea. He's just out feeding him full of drugs and alcohol, like, carrying on. And he's right. Like, he was literally right in that moment, mate. And always, I share this like many times. And to have the courage to do that, especially to one of his best mates, and in potentially the state I was in, could have turned around and gone, oh, fuck off, or, you know, like, what do you know, or fight him, or who knows? Like, he took a risk to do it, but he did it because he loved me. And, mate, from that moment, I was kind of like, I need to fucking do something about this. Like, what am I doing? I wasn't the person I was, and I continued still doing it, but I was more aware of it, and I probably toned it down a little bit. But Boxing Day that year, I was out with a mate and I ended up at a random's house and in Koala Park, and I was just like, it was daylight, I was miserable, I was depressed, and I was just like, what are you doing? Like, literally, and from that moment, I kind of like had a moment like, it's either you fix it or you're not going to be here anymore. Like, that's essentially, and 4 weeks later, mate, I met Lydia. and I got my life in order, and everything just started to happen. I didn't stop drinking or doing things like it. I liked doing that, but I had control over it. I didn't use it to mask what was going on in my life or anything like that. But I understood that I needed to get myself in order for me to actually see change or to have, beauty in my life. Like, and I met Lydia out in Burleigh, but it was through a mutual friend, and from that we haven't looked back. Like, it was just a blessing. But I always knew if I didn't actually commit to making change and actually owning my own shit, to go stop being a fucking victim. Like, I was still doing it, mate. I was still, um, and through this time I was seeing a psychologist, but it just wasn't. I just didn't feel a lot of change. And I say to a lot of people, if you go and see one and you don't get a connection, go and see another one, because you will find one. And I have found one. And because it's a quick out for someone that's anxious about doing it, they do it, it doesn't work. So it's easy. They don't work for me, so I don't have to do it again. So for me, that was that. There's still a long road ahead, mate, after that. But I'll go back, like, because I've missed the vital point of this whole story. But I'd had a blow up. It was AFL grand final day with my ex-wife, and I wasn't in a state at all to be out and doing what I did. And this is the night that, I wanted to take my own life. And that was the night where I'm like, I'm done. I'd literally, everything was organised, everything was planned. And like I said, I'd had it mapped out, how it was going to happen, how I was going to do it. And I was living with my mate Marcus and his ex-girlfriend Monique, and it wasn't for them, mate, I'm not here. Like, and literally say it, it's just as honest as I stand here. But I just made a decision. I'd had a letter that I wrote to the boys, and mate, I changed that letter so much. But there was times when I wrote that letter, mate, that I was just numb. Like, the words I was writing to my two kids to explain why I was leaving and why I couldn't, be here anymore. Fucking broke me. But in the time I was doing it, sometimes I was doing it with not a tear, just sitting there, like, it was just so structured that I was so set that this is how it had to happen. And I wanted to make sure that this letter was perfect, so when I'm gone, that they could look back and understand. It's like, it sounds backward, mate.
The rationale behind it, is just, yeah.
And, so this night I'd had it, and once that letter was finalised, it was almost like a ticking time bomb. It was like, well, I've put all my ducks in order here, and it's ready to go. I just got to press a button. And this night that was it. And I sent the letter to their mum, and again that night, that was it. Like, and fortunately for me, like, I'm still here from it. And like I said, if it wasn't for those two people, mate, I wouldn't be. But I always look at that as like, I beat myself up for a long time after that, because I was just like, you're so selfish, you say this, you say that. But I understand what people go through. A lot of people look at suicide as a selfish act. I don't agree with it at all. There's people battling stuff out there we have nothing about, mate. We have no idea what they've gone through, don't know what they've endured, what's happened to them. But for me, I just was just like, I have to get better. Like, this is an opportunity. I shouldn't be here, but I am. So let's make the most of it. And which tied into, eventually down the track, getting my life in order, and then meeting Lydia, and then eventually finding Christ. And everything, again, happens for a reason, mate. And I firmly believe that even though I wasn't a follower of Christ then, I had faith in God. Like, I always believed in God. But he's used me during that time. He's used my whole life up until that point, that he was always there for me. Even though I wasn't following him, he was there, and he used me in that time so I can do what I'm doing now, mate. I firmly believe it. Like, for me to be able to be vulnerable and share my story about that I've been to the darkest of depths of my life, to be able to share that with someone, if I can help one person, mate, then I've done my job. And I think that's what it's all about.
100%. What was it like speaking your truth and talking to someone for the first time about what was sort of going on in your head and your feelings?
I think I didn't really have an option, mate, initially. I think trying to think about, obviously I spoke to psychologists about how I was feeling and why, but I eventually got to a point where once I did it, it was just like floodgates, mate. Like,
Yeah.
I did it and I was like, fuck, how does that feel?
The best.
Yeah. And then I was just like, I became more, because early on, mate, I'd share my story and I'd be in like tears, like I'd be a mess. But I'd get through it because I knew that I needed to. And again, it's going to help someone. But the more I did it, the more I got more comfortable with doing it. But it's like anything, you try something for the first time, you're not great at it, but then you get used to it. And when I realised it wasn't about me anymore, when I realised that this selfish, egotistical rugby league player that's always been, and it creeps in every now and then, I won't lie to you, mate, like when it's built into your fabric of who you are for a long time, even though you do the work and you get through it, there's times we all fall short. And I've got a wife to remind me of that. But I think as I went on, I just knew there's a gift there, mate. Like I honestly believe that there's a gift in my life of leadership. I think there's a gift that people are drawn to me when I talk. People, and I don't say that again from an ego point of view. I just feel like every time I go to a school or a business or somewhere, a sporting club, me being able to share my experience, there's no uni degree behind it. It's lived experience. It captures them straight away because it's like, this bloke's not a fake. This bloke's just poured his heart out, shared stuff he didn't need to, because I could make up anything. You know what I mean? You could literally just start getting up there, which a lot of people, can do and just talk about mental health. But I feel like when you capture in that vulnerability from the get-go, you've got them straight away. You've got them focused on what you're about to talk about. And I feel like it has a lot of weight to it. And I'm not dissing people that don't have a mental health journey and do this, like, support mental health and whatnot. But from my point of view, I feel like that's the blessing on my life that I have.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something that I actually really admire about you. You've turned your pain into purpose. You're using your pain to help, the next person. And so that's exactly what I'm trying to do here with the podcast. I'm trying to encourage that vulnerable, conversations and that sort of thing. And, what is Men of Gold and what do you do?
Yeah, so when I first started, mate, like I was always like, always see mental health stuff, like, and even going through my own stuff, it's like there's always awareness about it, like we're raising money for this, we'll raise money for that, like but I was like, how can we all can play a part in this space? And I'm a firm believer of that too. And I was like, I want to create, the whole thing is our slogan's empowering vulnerability, and essentially want to get men to talk, because, and I mean, for women as well, women just do it a lot easier than us, but for this space, I just wanted to focus on men, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to go, an outlet to go and do that and to open up. And I didn't know how to do it. I first went to the church because they had the space, and Locke, the pastor there, was just like, mate, you can have the cafe and you don't have to pay for anything, whatever. So, because I was like, I didn't have money to put into this. It was just more of a passion to go, I want it, but I want it yesterday. And he's like, you can't do it on your own. You need people with you. And I've got a few Christian mates who are absolute champions, and they were all in. But I spoke to a lot of people, mate, and because he said you need a team, and I spoke to maybe 10, 12 people that couldn't commit. And these three were the only three that goes, I'm all in. And it was the best thing I did, mate, because there were times I was there all the time, but you need a team, mate. You need a crew. And so I wanted to create just a men's group, like just to literally like we're doing now, but just multiplied, and so I organised it for the first night. We had an intro night, and 73 men come the first night. And in that, mate, you probably got a few people that just want to see what it's all about, yada yada. And then I did it on a weekly basis. There's no time schedule to it. It was just like, get here at 6 and it finishes whenever it finishes, kind of thing. And we did it weekly for a long time, and then went to fortnightly. And just this year I've done it, last year did it monthly. So we changed from it being at the church to active at Coolangatta. When I know Joe, who owns the gym there, when I started going there, he's like, mate, if you ever want to do your men's stuff from here, and it's literally around the corner from my church. So like anyone that was ever going to the church, you've only got to come down to the gym. So I was pretty grateful for that, mate. But early on, I knew there was going to be limitations around holding something like that for men at a church, because there could be men who are far from wanting to go near a church, which, okay, I can appreciate that and understand on a few levels. But there's also the side of it, I know what this bloke's up to. He's going to get us in. He's going to get us in the men's group, and next minute, see this door? You can and I was like, I'm not
Try
that
to convert
person.
us.
Yeah. I was like, that's not what it's all about. And as much as I talk about it, I reckon there's still people who just go, mate, you're full of shit. Like, that's what you want to do. And if you ask me, I'd love for that to happen to people that aren't a follower of Christ. Like, I make no mistake about it, mate. I'd love more and more people to do it. But I see the beauty it's brought my life and everyone else's life that does follow Christ. It's like, why not? Like, and that's always like, well, what's such a people got this perception about it. But anyway, so we changed to the gym, and it's been good. The numbers sometimes, mate, and I've always said it's not a popularity contest. Like, I don't charge anyone. I'll never, and I've said this, I'll never make someone pay to come and be vulnerable. I think it's a rort, mate. If you make someone, if there's men out there right now, they're sitting here going, I'd love to do this, but it's going to cost me $3,000 to do that this weekend, to go to a retreat or go to this or go to that. I'm like, we're putting limitations in front of the men straight away. I wanted to be able to go, there's no excuse for you not to get here. It mightn't be your night, but I always say to people, if you've got something on that night, you know in advance when it is. If it's important, you'll make it work. Because if your mates have got a race day next Saturday, but you're working, you'll call in sick. And that's your reality. It's prioritising it, Exactly. So straight away, it's like, well, if you're struggling and you're in pain, you need help, go and see a psychologist or come to our group. Just do something. And so I just wanted you can never please everyone, but I just knew when we moved it from the church, we took away that, potentially, well, it's not going to a church, or this was just going to a gym, and having a community there already was always going to be influential for people that already know each other. So you get a lot of guys coming from the gym that it just breaks down that, barrier straight away, because they've already been there. They walk in the gym every day. So, but it's very courageous, mate, for people to make that decision to just show up.
Yeah, 100%. And I've read this book recently from Brene Brown, who does stuff on vulnerability, and she said creating a connection with the person in a lasting friendship isn't about how funny, smart, or rich you are. It's about how you make them feel that determines a friendship. True vulnerability is revealing your true self to someone and is the core of meaningful human experiences. What does being vulnerable mean to you, and how do you empower others to be vulnerable?
By being vulnerable myself.
Showing them.
Yeah. That's how my wife will always remind me, you can't portray and want people to be vulnerable if you can't be vulnerable yourself. And for those that follow me on Instagram, I'm a pretty open guy. And I made that decision because I'm like, I can't run a men's group and be an advocate for this space if I'm trying to put on this pretty picture every day and be honest. Like, then some of the times I share stuff that probably, like, maybe I shouldn't share that, but it's I don't really care. I shouldn't say I don't really care, but I've never worried what people think of me, in a sense that if I'm doing things in a positive light and I'm proud of who I am and what I'm doing, if you think that, I wouldn't do that, Westo's doing this or whatever, it says more about you than it says about me. Like, I'm never concerned. A lot of people say, there's a level of arrogance about that. And I say, well, there potentially, but I'm confident in who I am. Like, I'm okay with who I am. I love that I've got a past and I've got through it and I've overcome it, but it's my testimony that I get to share with other people. And I just think that that's what life should be about. I wrestle with Instagram so much, mate. Like, I see so many unfulfilled people on Instagram trying to just find that dopamine hit.
That next hit.
Mate,
it's the fake
shocking.
dopamine too.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's the...
And, like, even, this... I'll bite my tongue a little bit, mate, because as a Christian, mate, I can't be too judgmental. But in saying it, I said this to Lydia the other day about one topic, and I won't say it, but and she's like, you're just judging people there. And I was like, I am, but I just want to get to the deep-rooted cause of why do they do that? Why do they feel the need to go and do X, Y, and Z?
I know exactly how you feel, because when I started this, I didn't have social media before I started this. So now having on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, trying to get the reach out there and trying to, engage as many people as I can. I'm sort of on there more than I ever have been before. And I tell Jordan, I'm like, what is this shit that I'm seeing on here? Like, it's beyond me
Yeah.
that the things that are popular, the things that are going off, the things that are, you know, people like to see is just absolute nonsense.
Yep.
And I've got to like just control it back. Even like on TikTok, I'm like, Jordan, what's all this shit? Like they're all singing and dancing because that's what TikTok is. I'm like, fuck, this is shit, isn't it?
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
And I suppose they're like, I can see like me and my wife will do funny videos and like lip sync and videos and stuff like that. Like we get a good kick out of that kind of stuff. But I more mean, mate, like I've always said it's like, and I talk about my faith, but there's always people out there trying to just get that fulfillment out of so many different things, whether it's going to the gym and, you know, training with, a lot of people say like-minded people, but I'm like, do you really know these people? You just literally go into a gym, you just train the same, so that part of you want the same thing, but you've got to surround yourself with good people and actually people that keep you honest. And if you don't have that community of people and that, like, and you're relying on portraying on Instagram you're this person, you're lost. You're lost straight away. I don't care. People can argue with me all they want, but there's so many lost people, and there's times where I want to get rid of Instagram, but then I always think back to if one person comments on my video or I get messages after me. Every time I'm vulnerable on Instagram, I get inundated with messages, mate. Thank you so much. This, that, and the other. Yeah. So then I think I stop and I go, it's not about me anymore. Like if I can post something that's going to help someone, then essentially it makes it more comfortable for them and help them. Then I don't have to look at it. I can get it, you know, not log into it or whatever.
People want that real. People want that authenticity, and like it's something that you're creating a space for men to be uncomfortable. Because talking about your feelings and being vulnerable is uncomfortable, but you're creating that space for them, and you know they can speak their truth without any ridicule or judgment or anything like that. And I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins, and I was listening to a podcast he did, and you know something that was really interesting was that. You know, building that human connection, you know, is if not one of the most important things that you sort of do at your sessions is that human connection. He says that one of the main causes for depression is isolation. You know, humans are social beings and we thrive in a tribe. What we discover is that our strength is correlated to the extent of which we're willing to be vulnerable with others. It's those moments of honesty and intimacy when we get over our fears or our ego or our shame, our true self emerges, and that's where the real magic is. And that's exactly what you're doing there, and that's what I'm sort of trying to promote here as well. Yep. Why do you think we struggle to connect with our emotions fully?
The fear of someone else using that against you.
Is it?
Yep. I reckon there's a big part of fear with a lot of people, and whether they've been burnt or just the thought of saying it. And if I share something vulnerable with you, you know about it, and thousands of people know about it now. But if I was worried about it in a setting of just saying, you know, you've got that now, and if you want to be nasty about it, that could come back and hurt me. And I reckon a lot of people that happens with. I think there's a lot of people that have been burnt in the past, so then their walls go up. And essentially, we're all created like that. It's like if you go and touch a fire, like it's going to burn your fingers. So you'll go near it next time, but you won't touch it. It's the same feeling. It's like for a lot of men and people in general, they'll just shut down because they're like, I don't want that feeling again because that hurt me, and I don't want that. But it's pushing through that. But the isolation one's big, and especially in men 30 plus. Like you think about it, men go to the pub to meet people. You know, like, so if you're not in a sporting club, that's why sport's great to meet people. And I've always encouraged the kids to get involved in sport and this, that, and the other, because that's where you make friends. But as you get older, it's more hard to, you know, meet people, or it's through work. And if you don't have great people at work, then where are you finding them? Yeah. But men will go, and you'll see it, men will go by themselves to a pub. They'll get 6 beers in. Next minute, they're anyone's mate, you know. And I wanted to be able to remove that feeling of like, well, don't go to the pub. Come and sit in our men's group and listen to people talk, because someone's going to mention something you're going through, and you don't even have to say anything. Like, no one's pressured to say anything. And that's what I always say too. It's not about what you're going through. It's what someone else might be going through where you can add value. And I always say this to my mates, and I've said it many a time. A lot of my mates be like, good on you, Westo, for doing what you're doing. Never been to my men's group. But I'm like, come along. I said, the way you can show me support is sitting on a seat, Because it's like you mightn't be going through something, but I bet you someone will share something that resonates with you, and might even spark something in you that you had no idea about. And I think that's the beauty too, mate. It's sometimes we can be so self-absorbed with, oh, I feel okay or I don't feel okay or what. But what about the next person? Because if I can help you and you get that good feeling, and then you take that on and go, well, I want to help someone else, we'd all be in a better place.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, so
yeah.
I think there's a power in listening, and not always want to be the talker, but also just sitting in it. And mate, I've watched people, like men, come. This one guy, like, literally went 6 weeks in a row, didn't hear boo out of him. It's week 7, couldn't shut him up.
Really?
Yep. And I was literally just like, it just shows time, be persistent, keep showing, keep providing that space for someone. Everyone's got different time and they'll do it at their own time, but it's all about just creating it, mate, and just making that opportunity for people to do it. And once you're through the door, and we have an icebreaker when we start, so depending on our group, if it's 10, you know, we'll all start together, we'll have a high and a low. So straight away, just to get you talking, share a high and a low for the week or the day or whatever you want. And some people don't because they just don't want to say anything, so just go to the next person. But if we've had like times of 20, 30 people, we'll break up into like little groups of 5 or whatever, so everyone can get through, and then we come together. And it's so good, mate. Like, and one of the guys, the school teacher that I got on with Men of Gold, and he was the one that come up with the idea. He's like, he's great with kids and being a teacher. He's like, mate, I'm all over this. And the first session went for an hour and a half, and that's all we did. We went through highs and lows for everyone. Yeah,
oh, sick.
But and it just shows, mate. It's just you get an icebreaker or just something to get men going. Eventually, like, you know, they just don't shut up.
And it's almost that thing, like what I notice sort of with kids and schools and stuff. All you need is one of your mates to stand up and say something, and then it gives everyone else the permission. Oh, I can get up and say something too.
Yep.
It's just like you said, that first icebreaker. You just need someone to sort of speak up, and then it sort of gives everyone else the permission that they're like, oh, well, yeah, we were able to speak up. How do we feel worthy as men?
Great question, mate. There's a lot of, like, if I go the other way to when you don't feel worthy. So for me, I can only speak as a husband and a father. If I don't feel love from my wife, or I don't feel, a lot of my worth comes from my family, like, I suppose, but and again, my foundation in Christ. Like, again, I know who I am, so I am worthy, but there's a lot of people that feel they're not worthy. And I feel a lot of it's come from a childhood or an experience where they're either ashamed of, or they don't feel like they deserve something, so they don't feel worthy of something. Everyone's worthy, mate. Like, but I feel like when you feel loved and you feel safe and valued in your own 4 walls, that worthiness just goes to another level. But again, I can't excuse that. Like, Christ just tells you every day that you're worthy. You're so worthy. Like, because why aren't you? You know, and if there are limitations in your life that have prevented you feeling worthy of something, you can get through that. Like, you can overcome anything. And I think a lot of time people are, oh, I don't deserve that. But why don't you deserve that? It's because I've done this or that. And again, I sound like a broken record, but like, you're forgiven already. Before you, all them sins, all the things where you feel like you're ashamed or you've fallen short, like, you're already forgiven for that. If you sit in that and allow that to, like, manifest in your mind and brain, you're only killing yourself. There's so many people, like, just to let that burn inside, or don't get the help and that's why they still feel like they're not worthy of anything, because they feel empty, they feel lost, and they feel like their life shouldn't be where it is, even when some people look like they're doing well, but they still feel they're not worthy.
Yeah. You mentioned, we mentioned earlier in the podcast that about men's suicide in Australia, and, you know, we lose 45 men a week to suicide. You know, I feel like it gets spoken about more than ever. There's so many initiatives going around, but the stats doesn't seem like they're improving. If you had unlimited money and resources, how do you combat the mental health crisis in men in Australia? Men in gold every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Men of gold everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah.
And mate, I've been open, like, on that. I've been open because like this isn't a money maker for me, mate. And like I said before, there's so many people out there that I wouldn't say pry on men to be vulnerable so they can make money off it, but it's like this is a passion of mine, just like yourself. Like it's finding people that actually have a heart for it, because there's so many people go, oh, I've got this great idea, that, but is it your passion though? Because if it's not, I don't reckon you're invested in this. If you're invested because you want to make money off it, then you're starting off wrong already.
It won't last either.
No,
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
right. And that's why I was like, well, this will always last because I'm not dependent on money. I'm not dependent on someone like booking in or whatever. Like, if my worst headache, if it is that, if I filled that gym and couldn't fit people in it, mate, happy. I'd be happy if that happened. You know what I mean? But reality is it probably wouldn't. But at the same time, going back to the question, mate, like essentially creating and getting more influential people, mate, to be vulnerable. Because we have a look at our society, mate. Everyone wants to be this person because of that. And I've always said this, mate. Nico Hines is probably the most well-known person in on the camera, on the TV, doing things where he's actually honest and vulnerable, and he gets ridiculed for it many a times. Just recently, last year, I mentioned about how he said that rugby league doesn't define who I am. Good on you, mate. But then old ex-players and that are sitting there going, yes, it does, mate. You get paid $1 million a year. Like, shut up.
Yeah, he said something like, footy's what I do. It isn't who I am.
Yeah.
And it's like people were saying, well, he's not grateful for the opportunity. And it's just like,
no. Mate, is he grateful for the opportunity? He won the best player of the year a couple of years ago. Like, he's good at what he does, and he does that part. But it's so true, and that's why we have an issue with transition and identity, because we're told our whole lives that this is who we are, and it's actually not. Like, but that's one person. I even say in this space and even the footy space, Nico's probably the only one that literally is open and consistently honest about it. You'll get people here and there, but if we wouldn't need money, mate. You could have all the money in the world. We just need intentionality out of people to go, you know what? I've got an audience here. If you've got a big audience on Instagram, get on there and be vulnerable. Get on there and actually share what you're going on. I don't care for your flash cars and your flash houses and, you've done this or made this or whatever. Be vulnerable, because that's going to impact someone's life. Someone that's watching you isn't going to get the money that they've got, isn't probably going to get the house. It's unrealistic for most people that look at these influencers on Instagram or social media, but even not influencers, mate, like sporting stars, actors, like people that people aspire to be one day, look up to. We need more of those people being vulnerable and honest.
And that's what you mentioned there about breaking that stigma is also when people are going through, mental health, struggles. A lot of the time on the news, they won't talk about it. They'll hide it. They'll, he's just gonna have it. Like, either they lie about it. And I would love to see, there's two sides of it. People want privacy with it. I understand that. But something that Nico does well, and Michael Hooper, who used to play for the Wallabies, he will just come out and say, I'm having 2 weeks off. I'm going through the mental health struggles. Just normalizing it.
Yeah.
Just like you've rolled your ankle, you tore a hammy. Like, normalize it like that. I'll be having a couple of weeks off. I'll come back when I'm ready. Oh.
Yeah.
And it's not such a taboo topic, or people aren't allowed to talk about it, or, it's all secret, it's all hush-hush. I think that's going to sort of like, kids are going to see that and go, oh, well, that's just the same as a physical injury, is same with the mind too.
Yeah. Even on that too, mate, you talk about like the having unlimited money. I've always been an advocate of like going and get your mental health first aid. For people who because I always say, if you're going to be there for someone, and if I'm sitting there and I'm best mates with you and I'm like, I can notice something's different in you, like, and I've got the I suppose knowledge and life experience to pick up on these things. So I'm aware of it because I'm trained in it, but also I've lived it. So I can pick up,
signs and
yeah. But for everyday person, they don't, and I used to run the wellbeing QRL, the Southeast, and through that job, mate, like that was I love that job, but I was exposed to suicide in that time, families going through it, but then I created a community-based wellbeing support that, just as like you're saying, just as important as the trainers and the strapper and all these that run water and do all this and that. I'm like, so I created a purple shirt called Support Squad, and that was literally a mental health well-being person for every club. And I was just like, why are we putting such a focus? And I went to the NRL with this. I was just like, why are we doing this for all our like injuries we can see? What about the ones we can't? And I'm like, a little kid who's struggling should be able to identify a purple shirt at their local club and go, I need help, but they know where to go. And mate, I'm pretty proud of like doing that. I'm not there anymore, obviously. I got sacked because I didn't get the vaccine, but that's another story.
That's a different story.
But mate, it's so real though. It's just like we're always focused on what we can see physically, but to a point, it's just like we need to be able to understand that that's like you said, it's normalizing it, but the more people do it, that's how we get that, you know.
And even teaching kids young that it's, you know, okay to talk about it, because I came from a family where my dad, you know, his childhood growing up, like extremely abusive, extremely traumatic, and what he learnt from his childhood is that if you show emotion, it's weakness. So as a father, he changed physical things of how he wanted to be a father. He did no abuse, no alcohol, like always there, always present. But in terms of like emotional things that he didn't change or didn't know how to fix, was that how to be open and talk about things. And they would always hide fights. They would always hide things. Dad wanted no drama in the house. He just wanted to hide it all because his life was so much fighting and abuse and drama that when Dad, you know, when he had kids, all he wanted to do was a peaceful household.
Yep.
But that like was an unrealistic thing as growing up, because we would never see Mum and Dad fight. We'd never see them argue. We'd never see them, you know, have any sort of vulnerable discussions. So we just thought, oh, fuck, if we've got issues or we've got problems, we just don't talk about it, you know? And that's the thing that I talk about with Jordan, and is this like, you're not going to fix everything in one generation. You're going to pick pieces that you sort of want to change as a father. And like Dad did what he did, you know, no abuse, no alcohol, amazing father. And then I'm like, oh, what do I want to change when I'm a dad? It's I want to create that sort of emotional vulnerability with my kids, that like we're allowed to, you're doing with your kids. Like you show them, you cry, and you show them you have fights and your disagreements and those sort of things, but you show them the healthy way to sort of overcome those things and make up, and it's a healthy way to live.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, mate. And even with that, like with the kids, there's times where, again, I talk about my physical presence. Sometimes I walk into a room and if I'm angry, the kids could think I'm angry at them. So I learnt, and I wasn't always great at this, but I learnt over time. Lydia helps me, like she's incredible, but to be able to articulate to the boys, to be able to like, Dad's had a rough day today, like I'm just not feeling the best. And so straight away it just takes out that, in their minds, they're like, okay, it's not about me, thank God.
Because as kids, you do.
100%. They mightn't show up.
I've done something, Dad's pissed off because of me.
Yeah. And because it is sometimes a reaction, because they'll do something and you blow up and then, oh, Dad's pissed off at me or whatnot. But going back to the mental health stuff, and I was saying, if I notice something in you and I ask you a question, I need to be prepared for what you're going to say back. And I think that's one thing we need to learn and educate ourselves on, because if you tell me you're suicidal, what am I doing with that? You know, and it's a real question, mate. Like, because in that mental health training as well, like it's actually okay to say, are you suicidal? If I straight out thought someone was and I said it, it's actually okay, because as a person that's been there, you want someone to love on you. You want someone, because I don't know, as soon as someone identifies it, it's almost like you're being noticed. It's actually like, because most people that are going through suicidal thoughts are doing it and no one has any idea. Mate, I'm not proud of it, mate. I wore a mask better than anyone. And then when everything blew up and what happened, no one had any idea. They could see a few signs, but it made people kind of go, hang on a minute, what could I have done better? And we always hear that when we hear of a suicidal incident or whatnot. Families are always grieving, I wish I knew, or I wish I could have done more. We all can do more, mate. And that's the thing. It's such a reactive space, this mental health. We wait for something to happen and then it's like, well, what can we do to help now?
It's that knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah,
so
100%.
We've got to be a bit more proactive about it.
100%, mate, we do. And so even little things like that, because, you know, you go to a workplace and go, oh, you got to have your first aid, you know, for this job or whatnot. And we have to have it for work as a firey, which is, you know, understandable. But why haven't we all got our mental health first aid? We're all exposed to traumatic incidents on a weekly basis as fireys, but we've got great support for that. It's set up, you know, through the fire department. But even just in workplaces, I don't understand how it's not implemented. On some businesses that I've gone to, they implement it straight away. But it's like it's not hard. It's just like they'll come out. Like you'll have people come and do it at your workplace. And I think it's just another avenue for people to understand the space more. But then ideally, if just in your four walls at work or at home or whatnot, if you've got a better understanding of mental health and picking up the signs, there's a lot of people when they plan suicide, they start giving away stuff. So a lot of people will start to set other people up in and around them. And it's a sign because like, what's he giving everything away for? It's a healing thing for the person. It's like a coming to terms with what they're doing. But this, in a way, they get a good feeling at the time that they're helping someone on the way out.
Exactly.
And I know it sounds twisted, mate, but that's just reality. So if more people are aware of this and more people are willing to want to do it, it's just another like string to your bow, mate. Like it's like you don't want that awkward conversation if you tell me you're suicidal. Then you go, oh, or it's someone that genuinely says, hey, Westy, how you going? Well, I'm going to tell you how I am. So if you're prepared to like
ask the question,
you should be prepared to hear
the answer.
it. Yeah,
I say to my friends, like, I'd rather have an awkward conversation about your mental health and make it vulnerable and uncomfortable than carry your casket. I'd rather take the risk and ask you how you're going, and then you go, I'm actually all good. I'd rather ask and then find out rather than not ask and then find out later on that you've fucking done something.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd rather do that. Not long left. Couple of quick fire questions to finish.
Love these ones.
I'm not a dad yet, but I'd love to look down the road and get some lessons from you as a dad. What lessons did fatherhood teach you about life and how we should be living?
Well, it's still teaching me, mate. Patience is something that I've never really had, and my wife's going to be listening to this, so I can't say that I'm a patient guy. But I think the biggest thing is and again, I'm still struggling with, is just life's not about you anymore. It's actually loving someone other than yourself. And even people that don't have kids and they're in a marriage or they're just, together, boyfriend, girlfriend, it's different love to just having a partner. You've got someone that depends on you. It's like a puppy. Like they literally, despite our day, we come home and our dog, the cavoodle, comes home and it's like the best thing that's happened when we come through the door.
Yeah.
And it's so true though, that the kids depend on, their life is dependent on how you are as parents. And it's like, we can't be selfish. And again, there are times I'm self-absorbed and I fall short of that. But the biggest one is understanding that life's, not just about you anymore. And you've got, someone else to look after. And again, mate, I'm not a great example for you, but I'm heading in the right direction with it, like I'm honest with it, but it has been a struggle for me. But again, like I said, such a blessing, to have and to see. Well, my eldest turned 15 the other day, and he's almost as tall as me, and it's nuts, mate. It just happens like
what
that.
The hell? What's been the hardest day of your life?
Probably my attempt, mate. Yeah, I think. Well, not the day after. I think that day was, yeah, yeah, mate. It was a lot of self-reflection in that day. There's a lot of disappointment, beat myself up that I couldn't do it. Yeah, a lot of mixed emotions, as you could imagine, but it was kind of like, the gratefulness that comes through that was obviously outweighed everything. But in the time, mate, that was, it's pretty tough.
What's the relationship like with yourself now?
Pretty good, mate. We agree on a lot of things.
I'm always right.
No, I'm pretty good, mate.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm going through some stuff at the moment. Obviously with the kids and just with life in general, mate, and that it happens. But it was only like, I suppose, the last few weeks where, just with the kids and through child support and just stuff where I'm just in a position, mate, where I've never felt, I suppose, struggled that someone is so spiteful that wants to see me not do well. After the so far I've come as a man, as a father and a husband, to see that there's people out there that still want to see me not do well.
Yeah.
But again, mate, I keep resting on my faith, and I'm comfortable who I am. I have for a lot of my life. I've never been proud of certain things, but I'm proud of who I am, mate, as a man. I've got a lot of flaws that I need working on, but I'm open about them. I'm honest with them, and I'm a good person. So it's pretty good.
What are 3 non-negotiables for living a healthy and full life?
Go to the gym every day. Nutrition.
Yeah.
And just love.
Love that. What's a memory you never want to let go of?
That's a tough one, mate.
Is it?
I've had
There's a
one. Mate, my wedding day with Lydia was really special. Like our journeys, yeah. It's to where we were to where we are even today. But people thought we were crazy, mate. We got married 12 months to the day after we met, and my OCD, we met on the 2nd of February, and then we got married on the 2nd of February 2020, all twos, and I was just like, well, yeah, that's what we want to do. And it's just our story so different, mate. But we just knew it was a God thing. And I know God's been a big part of my life, but mate, I owe so much of it to her.
What do you think your past self would think of you now?
Be pretty proud, mate. I think, be cheering me along, to know that where I was and where I am now. I think I like to reflect. I'm a big music guy. When I say that, my wife's going to listen to that and just go, no, you're not. She has to drag me to live concerts and stuff that she likes. But, like, I resonate with music, like worship music, obviously through church. But, like, I like meaningful music. Like, I love Dermot Kennedy, and I'll often listen to him by myself and like listening to the words, sing it, mate. Sometimes sit there in tears. Like sometimes not about much, but just it's so powerful. Sometimes I just relate, and that's just something I do sometimes. But yeah.
Dayne, it's been an absolute pleasure to sit and chat with you today. I admire you and have so much respect for you and the work that you're doing. You said something earlier on. You said that your greatest pain, your greatest hardship, is actually your greatest gift. You're able to connect with people on a deeper level, and sit in them up with them and show them the path. And you're helping so many people. You're doing so many great things. And I wish you all the best. And this is hopefully the start of a long friendship with me and you.
Appreciate it, mate. And like I said at the beginning, mate, I'm grateful to have come on. It is a privilege, and again, I want to honour you too, mate. Like it's easy when you're doing this and getting people on to help other people, but it's great to know and hear from other people that you are doing a great job. And I only listened to your podcast yesterday, actually, with the lady about your story.
Oh, did you?
And,
yeah.
And which is funny, mate. And I sit there and I'm like, and I go back that far and listen to other ones you do. It's just like. It's easy to kind of keep doing you and helping other people, but sometimes it's nice to sit back and actually go, you know what, I am making a difference, and this is good, and good on you for, taking the leap and doing something that you're passionate about, because there's a lot of people that don't, and they allow limitations to prevent them doing something, so good on you, mate.
Thanks, mate. And we got a closing tradition. You know the closing tradition? You do, don't you?
Yeah.
Has she told you?
Yeah, she told me.
Has she? So for everyone listening, I've got a closing tradition where I don't ask the last question. I get friends and family. They send in questions for the guests. So who we got? We got Marcus. Got your mate Marcus. He's got a funny one. He goes, who is the celebrity you would say you look like the most? And he goes, he's going to say The Rock. Is that true? Yeah. And then he's got a serious one. Or not, yeah, I guess. He goes, you're covered in a lot of tattoos. What tattoo means the most to you?
Good question. a lot of them are pretty meaningless tattoos, mate. They're just, for fashion. But I got my kids on me. They're always at the top of it, mate. But I got my pop's name tattooed on me, and Pop was a pretty influential person, almost like my dad growing up. And when he passed away, mate, it absolutely rocked my world. So to have, talking about meaning, like his nickname was Rusty, and so I've got him tattooed over my shoulder, but it'd be that, mate.
Last one for you. It's from your beautiful wife, Lydia.
Here we go.
If you could go back and do it all over again, what's one thing you would change? Nothing.
Not me.
Nothing.
I would have been open to begin with. I think I let a lot of my life turn out the way it has through my inability to talk, which led me to, I keep saying, if I had maybe opened up earlier on in my life and understood the power of that, and my life might look different. But at the same time, I don't like looking back, mate. Like I don't like, because I always say, and I've said it many times, that I don't regret anything in life, because it's always taught me a lesson. Like, I've always led me to where I am here today, and I honestly believe I was meant to be sitting here with you today talking about this. So we have that mindset. It's just like, that's what all these tough times are for, like to actually shape you as a man, as a person. And if you've got that mindset, it's like we don't want to keep looking over our shoulder, we want to keep looking forward. But essentially, mate, if learnt the power of vulnerability from an earlier age, that would have been great.
Well, you're helping the next generation do that now, mate. So, again, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Mind Your Head. If you'd like to support the show, be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really supports the show and helps others discover us. Don't forget to join us on Instagram and TikTok at mindyourhead.podcast.